Have you ever wondered why we tell stories differently for little boys and little girls? Or for men and women, for that matter? And welcome back to the heart of the stories we tell. I'm Rob, the host, and this is another look deep into what makes a story, a theory on storytelling by a storyteller who believes that every story has merit. And tonight's episode is... I don't think I've really spent much time thinking about the difference between a boy story and a girl story. I mean, seriously, what's the difference? But then I saw this little video on YouTube. What if Cinderella were a guy's story? And I said to myself, this is funny. I mean, I'm an emancipated guy. I like the fact that there are strong, powerful women. Hell, I'm really pulling for the Wonder Woman movie to be awesome because she's one of my favorite characters. We don't tell stories differently. I mean, Wonder Woman's just Superman, right? And if Cinderella were a guy, it wouldn't be that different of a story if you really think about it. I mean, really, what's the difference? It's just Aladdin, right? I mean, that was what I thought. Then I started going through it. And especially with last week's episode where we went through the whole points of what the Cinderella story is. How many of the beats are the same between Cinderella and Aladdin? Not as many as I thought. And you know what kept cropping up as the main difference? How we treated the main character. So let's really dive back into what Cinderella is. She's at her super low point. She goes forward because her mother's dead. And she's at the lowest point she is when she has to prepare her sisters for the ball, and she can't go. She really wants to, but then her fairy godmother shows up and grants all of her wishes, and she gets to dance with the prince, and yay, happy. But then, oh no, the clock strikes 12, and she has to run home, and boom, she's going to live unhappily ever after. But then that's okay, because the prince comes, and she lives happily ever after. Sounds like a cool story. Well, what about Aladdin? Well, Aladdin's homeless, his parents are dead, he's penniless, so he's just as bad off as Cinderella, maybe worse so. He needs to steal to eat. But see, that's just it. He steals to eat. He has his own actions he's doing right off the bat when we meet him. Instead of just, well, gotta do what I gotta do. It's no, I have to take and live my life. Both characters get some wish fulfillment. Specifically, Genie grants Aladdin 3 wishes that he has to choose. The fairy godmother just comes to grant the one wish, the ability to go to the ball. And it's kind of funny, all she is all about dressing her up to look pretty. And, I mean, if you switch that around to make Genie just dress him up to look pretty, it's nothing like what happens in the story. No, bibbidi-bobbidi boo, Aladdin gets a lot more say in what's going on than Cinderella does. Why is that? Well, they're different stories, really. But are they? They're both down on their luck. They both meet someone that they're way out of their league because they're just homeless and they're rich. And then boom, they fall in love and everything is great. Either one of them could easily be a princess, but one of those princesses saves themselves, while the other one gets saved a lot more. Even the climactic bong, bong, strikes midnight is so passive. Aladdin messes up. Aladdin actually takes responsibility. Aladdin loses a fight. But at the end of the day, Cinderella just, oops, time to go. Gotta go back to being Cinderella. And at the same time, there's no conflict for her, other than her ugly sisters. And I mean, when you think about other stories too, if we were going to armor up a superhero, this is what they'd look like, right? Well, unless the Witchblade only chooses female ones, in which case their midriff needs to be exposed for tactical reasons, and that's not even going into the comic book. And we've even seen the same exact character portrayed by a male and a female. And when we do, does it feel different? Is it just a little bit off? This YouTube video that if Cinderella were a guy goes on to say, hey, we wouldn't tell this story to a boy. And I wonder, why is that? Is True Love's Kiss not just as magical? Well, we see that it is in other stories, but it's because of just how much action you have and how much agency you have in your own story. We don't always give women agency, and that's not to say that we haven't gotten better over the years, because Cinderella's an old story. When I was a kid, back in the 80s, there was a game called Metroid, and Samus was the badass, mercenary, bounty hunter character, and when you beat the game, you found out something surprising about him. He's a her. And I wonder how much of that has to be a surprise. If you run back into the Wayback Machine and imagine yourself in 1980, could you tell the story where the woman was the action hero? Well, I'd like to say yes. In fact, over the last couple of weeks, we've talked about diversity a couple of times, mostly because it's proven to be one of my most popular subjects. But this time, I want to look at it from another angle. Because you see, Metroid's not the only one. I've already covered shows that did this in the 80s. And I don't want to beat a dead horse going on about G.I. Joe in it. But at the end of the day, like Metroid, it's one of those stories that we had action hero women. But now, go back to just a few years ago. The MCU didn't want to give us a Black Widow movie because they didn't think a female superhero would sell. It's been like pulling teeth to get Captain Marvel. And who's going to get it first? So as of the recording of this, I obviously haven't seen the movie yet. Do you think it's going to be a superhero movie? Do you think it's going to be a blockbuster? Or do you think that guys aren't interested in seeing women's stories, and we have to tell women's stories differently? I want to put this a slightly different way. Would you go see an Aladdin movie if Aladdin was a girl? Or would you read your son a goodnight story of Cinderella, where Cinderella was a guy who was cleaning the house and waiting for his fairy godmother to come rescue him? It's an interesting question if you really think about it. How do we tell stories differently for a boy audience or a girl audience? And I mean, Hollywood makes a ton of money by sitting there and saying the demographic for this movie is 18 to 32-year-old men. Well, the demographic for this movie is 16-year-old girls, and the demographic for this movie is everyone. And of course they want to get everyone, but when they can't, they dial it into those specific ones they want. But my main theory for this video is that they're wrong, and that the idea of telling stories differently is wrong at its base. We all like the same types of stories. We all like action adventures. We all like power fantasies. Now, I may be crazy, but, no, I am crazy, but I might not be wrong. See, the first time I really came across the idea of these things being different, I was a full-grown adult. I never really thought about it as a kid. Legos were Legos. I didn't care if it was a boy or a girl playing with them. And one of my favorite shows growing up was Gem. In fact, I was in college by the time someone told me, no, that was for girls. You shouldn't have been watching that. And I'm like, it was super awesome. And that's probably why I give the movie so much crap. It's the only movie I've ever given a Mercury rating to. It's poisonous. Do not touch. It's horrible. When I was growing up, I didn't care if the hero was a woman or a guy. At the end of the day, Gem was awesome because it was action and it was power fantasy, and I even imagined what it would be like to be on stage and singing, and She-Ra was just as awesome as He-Man, in fact, maybe even more so, where He-Man had all the advantages. He was living in the palace, he was this, he was that. She was fighting a rebellion against the evil empire. She had to be even stronger. Cinderella was a cool story about love at first sight, and Aladdin was an awesome story about wish fulfillment. The fact that they were the same never really occurred to me. In fact, I liked She-Ra so much that when they redid the He-Man cartoon back in the year 2000 or so, I was upset she wasn't in it. And when I heard that there was a chance she would have been if they'd gotten another season, I was even madder. To this day, I still watch the He-Man She-Ra Christmas special every Christmas. Because, yep, that's how much of a dork I am. And I could do an entire video just on what they did wrong in the Gem movie. In fact, I probably will one day once I get some of the vitriol out of my system. But the biggest thing they did was they wrote it to a modern teenage girl audience instead of to an everyone audience. The power fantasy went away. The magic went away. And it just became Never Say Never Justin Bieber Story Part 2. That notwithstanding, I'm not going to say that the female character hasn't come a long way over the years. In movies and cartoons, in books, we have strong female leads all the time now. But, at the same time, there's still a bit of disproportional change what we expect the female character to do. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Do you think that we write stories differently for men and for women, for boys and for girls? And if so, do you think we should? Or do you think that our stories limit themselves when we sit there and we say, no one wants to see a female superhero? Or Cinderella needs to only have things happen to her, not her have any agency? Make sure and leave me a comment down below, because this is one of the most interesting ones and I'd really like to start a discussion on it. But for now, if you've liked what you've heard, I need you to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe so that we can build a community and get much more into the heart of all of the stories we tell. Don't forget I do these weekly videos, I do reviews, and now I'm going to be starting a Throwback Thursday series shortly. So subscribe to get all of that, and I hope you have a good night, and thank you for walking with me through the heart of the stories we tell.